Hey guys, this video is going to go on our myths about Japan playlist because it concerns a topic that is partly true, but also a lot of it is myth, and that is the image that we get that Japanese people are extremely hard-working and overworked. And just to start off, of course, it is sometimes true. We know some Japanese people who are extremely hard-working, who work 6 days a week and 10 hours a day, and we know some people who've literally worked themselves to death, where they've destroyed their health by working really hard. One guy in particular we know worked way too hard all his life, and then by the time he retired at 65, he'd already had a stroke and a heart attack, and then he retired and they gave him his retirement party and said, okay, thanks very much, and then kept him on part-time and continued to work him pretty hard as a part-time employee because of his expertise. So they continued to work him a couple of days a week, and now he's 68 and they're still working him. They're still calling him up and getting him to go and to help them with projects and things because of his expertise, and because he struggles with his health. He's had a heart attack and a stroke, and he takes a lot of medication, and he's struggling to keep his health, and they keep stressing him out, and it sort of doesn't help. So they're the sort of stories that we hear that get spread around that give the illusion that that's always the case. And it's quite often, this is often the case on the Myths playlist. We've got a lot of videos about things like this where some examples or some examples like this are then extrapolated on to give the illusion or give the impression that everybody's the same. We get that with the weird things on the Myths playlist. Somebody some people in Tokyo injected some Botox into their foreheads and made donut shapes, and then suddenly it's getting in national press that everybody does that in Japan, that sort of thing, And it's a bit like that. There are examples of people working themselves to death in Japan. There's actually a Japanese word for it, for working yourself to death. But it's sort of become a bit of a thing. Now, if you've seen our video on the how-to playlist about hardship and suffering, it explains that in Japan, hardship and suffering are considered to be really good. That if you endure through hardship and suffering, that's a great thing. And in actual fact, trying to find ways to make your life easier or to try and avoid hardship and suffering are considered to be cop-outs. So in a lot of societies, in a lot of cultures, we try and find ways to improve our lives and spend more time with our families and make our lives more pleasant and improve our health and do all that sort of thing. Whereas in Japan, that's considered a low priority, because you might have seen another video we did on reality, illusion and myth, reality, illusion and image. And it's sort of what's happened is that Japan's built itself this image, this self-image of working yourself to death and working really hard and day after day and working really hard, and people don't publicly relax too much here. You don't see people sitting around their front garden reading a book. Usually if people are at home relaxing, they do it inside where no one can see them. And even when people go to the beach or the park or something during the summer holidays, usually they're doing things. They're busy organising their barbecue and busy throwing the frisbee, and people don't want to sort of lie under a tree and read a book and go to sleep and things like that, because it's sort of considered to be lazy or something. They don't like that, like to give the image of themselves as not doing something all the time. So it's sort of become this self-image that everybody's got this big thing, busy, I'm busy. And when you ask people, hey, how are you? Oh, I'm really busy, and I'm really, and people that you're close to here, friends and family, and if they're really busy or not. And you'll hear them telling other people, oh, I'm really busy. And you think, well, actually, no, you're not. This weekend, I know for a fact you're not. But they're always going to give that impression. And so this is what's happening with workers, with people at work, and with students. We made a video this week about students during their summer holidays, going to school and going to Juku and things. And there's a few things going on here. One is One is this constant thing about giving the impression that you're really, really busy, and quite often people just aren't. You know, even when they do have time when they're not busy, they still try and give the impression that they're busy. So, and it's a sort of a self-perpetuating thing, because lots of people do that. Almost everybody's doing that. Everybody does it. It's the Japan thing, right? Because everybody does something. Everybody does something. You would have heard us say that lots of time on our videos, because it's just the way it is. It's the Japanese thinking, and Japanese people will say that to you. Why do you do that? Oh, everybody does that. That's the explanation. Why do you do this? Everybody does it. And that's the explanation. That's why I do it, because everybody does it. So it's the same with this. You've got to give the impression that you're really busy all the time. And when you're close to people here, friends and family, you'll see how they do that. You know, often people in their work things, the postman were going past here, you know, he'll get off his bike, he'll run to the front door and ring the bell and give them their mail if he has to do that. And you'll see staff do that in banks and post offices and things as well. They do this short, fast run thing where they're taking short steps but moving their legs really fast to look like they're running. So they sort of run over to this desk and run over to this desk and run back to the counter and run over there. And when you look, they're not actually moving that fast, but they're giving the impression that they're moving that fast. Hurry, hurry, hurry. You know, and it's a constant thing like that. Hurry back to the desk and sit down and move papers around and things like that. So there's this giving the illusion. There's been a thing recently in Japan that is a little phenomenon where doing overtime is considered a thing. And in the past, usually overtime was unpaid overtime, and you'll often see this on the internet as well. Japanese people do a lot of unpaid overtime. Again, that is partly true. But also, a lot of modern companies now do pay overtime to their staff, because they know that if they don't pay overtime to their staff, they might lose their staff, because slowly staff here are becoming a little bit more conscious of their own benefits in their jobs. So most companies now do actually pay overtime, and so. But there's still this big thing about doing overtime. You know, you've got to do the overtime and stay late at night and go home weekends and things. So what will actually happen is nobody wants to leave work first. So you'll get all these people at work looking at each other, sort of looking, oh, everybody's still here, so I'll have to stay too. So you get this sort of perpetuating thing where nobody wants to go home first. So everybody's sitting in the office pretending to be busy, because nobody wants to seem lazy or seem like they're going home first. So that's one thing that's been going on in Japan forever, that one. But there's some others as well. Another one is people that don't have overtime, particularly men that don't have overtime, will actually hide. We actually mentioned this briefly recently in another video. They'll often hide, and you'll see them at night, 8 o'clock at night, 9 o'clock at night, outside convenience stores, sitting back in the car, watching TV, because we've got, in our nav systems, we've got TVs in our cars, everybody. So they sit back in their car and they'll be watching TV and smoking cigarettes and drinking coffee in their car at 8 o'clock at night, 9 o'clock at night in the car park of the convenience store. And there'll be other guys in the convenience store, still in their work clothes, their salaryman clothes, you know, and they're in their salaryman clothes reading comics, reading manga, and looking at girly magazines and stuff, and then go sit in the car and watch the TV and smoke a cigarette. They're just killing time, because they don't want to go home like too early, because they want to give that impression that they're working really hard. And because the other one that's been around forever is quite often after work, the boss says, let's go to the izakaya, and they all go to izakaya and have dinner and drinks and things, and that's considered to be work. They consider that to be work because it's a work obligation, work responsibility thing. So there's that, and then actually at work too, a lot of the stuff that they do, we made a video once called Smart Biz in Japan, and talking about how so much time at work is wasted here, and that's another element of it too. A lot of what they do here is actually wasted time that is unnecessary. You know, we know one guy who spends 2 days, at the end of every month, he spends 2 days writing reports about what he's done during the month. And he said that everybody in his department has to do that. And I said, so everybody has to write these really long reports? He said, yes. And I said, so he gives it to the boss. So how does the boss read all of them? Because if there's so many, and he said, oh, he doesn't, he just puts them in the filing cabinet. And that's 2 days a month. 2 days a month, everybody burns just writing out reports on what they did during the month, and then the boss doesn't read them. And there's a lot of stuff like that here. And because that's the same, see, that 2 days, they're sitting there looking really busy writing this report. Well, they're not producing anything, and they're not really that busy, are they? They're just writing a report about what they've done. And quite often those reports are fluff too. We know a girl who worked part-time at a supermarket, and one day her cash register was a couple of hundred yen up. So a couple of dollars up. So when she did the totals and the balances, there was an extra couple of hundred yen in there, a couple of dollars in there. And so she had to write a report about why her cash register didn't balance. And so she just wrote, well, I think I must have shortchanged a customer, you know. And she gave it to the boss, and the boss looked at it and handed it back to her and said, you have to make a longer report. Right? A longer report. What else could you possibly write? I mean, what else, you know? But there's a culture of that here. There's a lot of faffing, there's a lot of fluff, there's a lot of padding, you know? And so in actual fact, if the people just did their work, another one I'll just throw in quickly too, this is an amazing one, that going to sleep on your desk at work in most companies in Japan is considered to be an acceptable thing to do, because it actually gives the impression that you're overworked. So putting your head down on the desk and going to sleep for 10 minutes is considered to be a good thing to do. And I've actually heard people say that they know co-workers who fake it, who will actually put their head on the desk and pretend to be asleep for 10-15 minutes to give the boss the impression that they're really burnt out and they've been working too hard. You know? And again, there's a lot of examples of stuff like that. We're always hearing stuff like that. So if you took all this faffing and sleeping and reading comics and writing silly reports that nobody reads, and if you took all that stuff out of the working week, you just have a normal working week. You know, it's just, for most people, I mean, there are exceptions. Some people here are really worked to death, there's no doubt about it, but most of the people that we know, and most of the people that you meet, most of the people who you watch, I mean, this is the thing, when you don't really know people really well, you just get the impression that, oh, this guy's working himself to death. But the closer you get to people, the more time you spend with people, the more you know about them, the more you start to realise that this is often the case. It's all just illusion, you know. The other one's the school kids. We're talking about the school kids on a recent video there about the holidays and how they're all going to school during the holidays and they all go to the Juku and they all do that stuff. And again, a lot of that is it's just a waste of time, you know. They'll be in badminton club, you know, and oh, you know, what are you doing during your school holidays? Oh, I'm going to badminton club. Okay, how often do you go to badminton club? 6 days a week. You know, 6 days a week. They go to badminton club 6 mornings a week. Or they go, not always, but we know people who do six mornings a week. Or judo, I go to judo 6 mornings a week. Or, you know, the guy we know who does judo goes 6 mornings a week and then a couple of afternoons a week. You know, just over the top. And that's really common with their sport clubs. Their sport clubs are just over the top. You know, during the school holidays, they'll go every day. During the normal school week, when it's not school holidays, they'll often go before school every day to sports club. You know, just over the top. I mean, you know, unless the person's going to become a professional badminton player or a professional soccer player, they all treat the sports club like they're going to become a professional, you know. And it's just, particularly the soccer one, they all want to be international soccer players, you know, which just, you know, so 6 days a week they're playing soccer. And again, it's not necessary. And then you get these kids that are all tired and they can't stay awake because they're so tired. But it's because, you know, it's because they're doing all this stuff that's not necessary. You know, just over the top. 6 days a week of badminton lessons. Well, badminton club, you know. And again, what actually happens is, at those clubs, they'll often sit around. We know a kid that goes to tennis, and she said that she'll go to tennis for 8 hours on a Sunday, and she'll be at tennis for 8 hours on a Sunday. And I said, you can't play tennis for 8 hours in the middle of summer. Oh no, I usually only play, you know, 4 games. So that's the other thing, they sit around, and we know this from our own experience as well. You know, you go to martial arts, Tai Chi, and quite often you're sitting around all day. and you know, your turn will be 30 minutes or an hour or something, and the rest of the day you're just sitting around all day, and there's a lot of that goes on here as well. So it's the same as the Juku. We've talked about the Juku, you know, the private schools that usually they go to school during the day, and then at night they go to Juku, and weekends they go to Juku, and school holidays they'll often go to Juku every day, and they have special classes on at the Juku during the school holidays, and they go to these special classes and they're there all day, and what's actually happening at the Juku is they'll sit and do their own study and their own homework, and the teachers sort of wander around and help them, and you know, if they put their hand up they'll come and help them. And they will actually have special classes where the teacher stands at the front of the class and actually teaches them something. Says, okay, today's subject's this, and they actually teach them something. However, a lot of the time that they spend at Juku is totally wasted. They'll sit around playing with their smartphones, because the Juku's a really funny place. The students are their students, but the students are also their customers. And so they tend to treat the students like customers, which means that they tend not to discipline them, and they tend to let them do whatever they want. And so if the kids want to sit there and play on their smartphones, or play Nintendo, or talk to each other, or do whatever they want to do, they're usually allowed to, because they're a customer. And the teachers want to keep them happy, because if the kids don't like that Juku, they'll go somewhere else, and that Juku will lose that customer. So it's quite common in Juku to see a table with all the kids sitting around, all on their smartphones, all talking to each other. And so they might go to Juku for 5 or 6 hours. They might go there after school in the afternoon and stay till 10 o'clock at night, or they might go there on a public holiday or a school holiday and stay there all day. But in actual fact, there's only a couple of hours of it might be spent actually doing something worthwhile, and the rest of it will be sitting around gossiping and chatting and sending messages to each other, and just burning time. You know, so again, but it's giving that impression, isn't it, that, you know, and when you talk to them, they'll tell you, you know, oh, this day I've got the sports all day Sunday I've got club, and then I go to Juku, and then on Monday to Friday I've got Juku during the morning, I've got club in the afternoon, and I've got, you know, and you hear these stories, and because this is why we have this impression that we hear these stories, wow, Japanese people work themselves to death. Well, yeah, but it's all padded out with all this wasted time in the middle. I mean, in actual fact, if you wanted to, you could remove all the padding and the wasted time and just do the work part and have a normal life like people outside Japan do, you know? And it's not judging whether or not this way they live is a good thing or not. You know, if they're happy with it, obviously that's a good thing. But it's just that it's interesting that a lot of it is just illusion. A lot of it really is just giving the impression that we're working ourselves to death. When in actual fact, a lot of it's just padded out. You know, and it's sort of a bit of a shame in some ways, because you sort of what's lacking is sort of freedom to have free time and free thinking and just creative sort of what you want to do with your time. It's sort of a bit sad when you talk to kids here and say, what did you do on your school holidays? And they all just say, I went to Juku, I went to club. What's the most fun thing that you did for school holidays? Oh, you know, I went to club. You know, and it's sort of sad, because there's no sort of creativity. They're not sort of thinking of something fun they want to do, or some hobby that they just want to do themselves. It's all group related activities, and there's very few people here actually spending their time doing anything sort of creative that they want to do, that expresses any sort of individuality or any sort of, you know, self-will. And that's one thing that you notice with the kids here. If you ask them a question about something that they're programmed to answer, they'll answer you with an answer. But if you ask them what they think about something, or what they like, or what their favourite something is, quite often they freeze up and they can't sort of give you an answer, because they don't sort of have that thing. It's all the big group thing, you know, and it's sort of, that's the thing that's sort of missing. And it's a bit the same with the workers too, with this giving the impression and the wasting all the time at work and all the rest of it, and then their free time's really limited quite often, because they're burning it all, giving this impression that they're so busy. and then their free time's really limited, and so they're not spending enough time with their families. You can see it. It's really sort of sad here when you do see families in the park and you watch the kids and the fathers in particular, and quite often they behave like strangers. The kids will be sort of showing something to the fathers, and the fathers look really uncomfortable. We showed a video recently at the beach, and there was a whole heap of examples. All these fathers standing around looking at their smartphones, looking really uncomfortable on the beach while the kids were playing and saying, look at this, because the most sort of natural people in Japan tend to be the young kids, because they haven't been programmed fully yet. So it tends to be the young kids that tend to have the individuality and tend to have the personality and tend to have the sort of the bit more free thinking going on, because they're still little kids that haven't been programmed yet. But as they get older, you know, by the time they get to the end of elementary school and start junior high school, usually the programming really starts, and you actually see them change, because when they're at elementary school they do have a bit of free time for a bit of free thinking and a bit of relaxation and a bit of fun. And so quite often elementary school kids will have a bit of a personality and be funny or be, you know, be sort of interesting. And then as they get older and they start to go into elementary school, you'll see them just sort of lose it. They start to become really robotic and really, you know, and how are you, you know, what have you been up to? Oh, you know, club, juku, you know. Ask 100 Japanese kids what you've been doing with your summer holiday. Club, juku. That's the answer, you know. What's your favourite thing? Club, juku, you know. And the adults are the same. What have you been doing? Oh, work is hard. Work is hard. You know, it's all the same. Whereas, you know, when they're young, when they're elementary school kids, they've still got a bit of individuality going on and a bit of free thinking and a bit of an appreciation of fun, life, you know. So it's sort of sad in a way. It's because and most of it, it's just not necessary. It really isn't necessary. The time that's spent on a lot of these things is not really necessary. But it's just to give the impression. As a student, as a high school student, a girl told me once it's her job. I said to her, you know, wow, you know, summer holiday at Juku, how do you feel about that? It's my job, she said. And this is the thing, when everybody's doing it, you have to do it too. You can't take the day off Juku and stay home and do some hobby that you want to do, or just go play with your friends, hang out with your friends. Because everybody's doing the Juku thing, you've got to do it too. And it's the same as the worker too, you know. Take the weekend and go camping with your family or something, or do something like that. They can't do that because nobody else is doing that. So they're obliged to work hard as well. So, sort of sad. Anyway, there it was, out of time. More videos coming soon.